Hi everyone, it's InDesign 1, and I know that this lab was supposed to be at the end of last week, but after looking at the schedule and a couple other things that we're going to have to go over this week, I'm pushing it to the beginning of this week. The due date for this is not going to be until 3/14 anyway, March 14th, because Lab 6 isn't due until March 7th. I will be going over another lab later in the week. This is a lab that's going to happen much further out, but I want to give you the beginnings of it so that you can start thinking about it. This will be one of your final projects that will be due, and it will take several weeks for you to complete. So I want everyone to have some time to give it some thought, what you want to put in it, and it's basically going to be a brochure. But this lab is Lab 7, and I want to go over this lab, and I also want to go over some questions that have come in recently, which are great questions, and I'd like to go over these so that everybody can benefit from the questions that some people have been asking. First off, I'm going to use this page that actually, let me just do a new file. Hang on. Let me fix this. I'm noticing on my second one that the sharing is not coming through, so let me just check this. So hopefully the sound is. All right, so here's the week 8 webcast 1. Let me go to this new file here. The first question was a really good question a student asked, and it's about tint versus opacity. And I want to make sure that everyone is clear on the differences between those two concepts. So I'm just going to create 2 boxes here, just 2 frames, fill each of them with a different color. And this is not important how I'm doing this. It's more important that you understand the concept of the opacity versus the tint. All right. This green frame is 100% opaque. It completely covers up the frame behind it. And what the swatches panel is telling me right here up in tint is that currently this green color is 100% of the color defined by the CMYK equivalent here. Now it doesn't matter whether it's CMYK or Pantone or RGB. The point is that it is 100% opaque, and it contains 100% of the color defined by whatever its number definition is. If I change the tint, so I'm going to just click on the little arrow to the right, drag this down to something closer to 50%. And I may not get it to stick right on 50, but anyway. You can see that I have a lighter green. This green is still the same CMYK value, but it is 50%, it's a 50% tint. So you're only seeing 50% of the color. Now let's take this exact same situation over here. Just going to duplicate these 2 boxes. I'm going to put this back at 100%, so we're starting over again. Okay. Now in this case, instead of using the tint, I'm going to use the transparency effect. And I can get there by going to Effects here, if you have it docked. If not, you can go to the Effects panel and display it so you can dock it. You can also get to Effects by going to your Object menu, going down to Effects, and then moving over to that exact effect. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my panel over here since I have it docked and it's available to me. The very first effect is always on the drop-down menu. And for those of you who are not familiar with effects, it's very similar. In fact, it's exactly the same effects that you would see in Photoshop, because they use the Photoshop effects panel in one of the more recent versions of InDesign in order to give us some of these other options. But I'm in transparency. And the opacity is 100%, which is different from tint. And if I change this opacity to and let me bring the box that dragged over. If I change this opacity here to, let's say, 50%, the same thing I did with the tint, and I preview that by moving this out of the way, you can see that though I get a similar color green, this is not the same thing. This is not the same animal here. This is a 50% tint, but it is 100% opaque. This is 50% opacity, and its blending mode is normal. And you can see that now it's see-through. It's 50% see-through, transparent. Think of different types of fabric, how some have different opacities. It's the same type of thing. The difference, though, further down the production cycle is that now you have introduced transparency into your file. And if I go to my Pages panel, there is a new icon up here. Oh, it just disconnected me and reconnected me. Whoa. I actually been on tech support for the last hour. We had a Java thing happen again. Apple sent out an update and it wouldn't allow me to connect. So some funny stuff is going on here. Let's hope that this is all coming through clearly. Anyway, getting back to that little icon, it's in the upper right-hand corner, and it looks like a little gray and white set of teeny checkboxes. InDesign always wants you to be aware that you have introduced transparency into your file, because when you send a file to a printer, different printers handle transparency in different ways. And if you're sending it to a professional commercial printer, they need to know that you have introduced transparency. This used to be a much bigger issue in previous years, and it's not as big an issue now. But and just discuss with your printer. I guess that's, if you're going to send it to a commercial printer, just make sure that you let them know, and then they can ask you some questions. But if you don't really need transparency, don't get that lighter color green by using transparency. Use it by changing the tint. And it needs to be a swatch in order for you to do that. You're not going to be able to get that same impact if you've created a color from the color panel, at least as far as I know. In this case, it is a swatch, so the color panel is allowing me to go up and change its tint. But that's not going to be the case, I don't believe, if I've just defined it. So that's the difference between tint and opacity. And again, if anyone has any questions on that any further, then let me know and I can talk about this more. We have not really gotten into InDesign effects yet, so some of this I'm sure is very new to people, but I wanted to bring it up because if one student had this happen, I'm sure that others will too. All right, another issue that I am seeing in the homework. This keeps kicking. I hope I see it still there, but I see it keeps saying that this daisy keeps joining and joining and joining. I don't know what's causing that. Let's hope that it's okay. All right, I want to go back to Lab 3 because this is where I saw this the most. I know a lot of you probably don't pay attention to hyphenation. It's not something in your day-to-day jobs that you deal with. But you've got to really start focusing on the shape of type, and if hyphenation happens, how is it occurring in your type, especially with large type. If you're in a situation where you have 2 pages of text at 12 point or 10 point, this isn't as important as it is when you are dealing with type as a design element, and that's what these slides were. And of course, like I said, none of you, anybody who is not in this industry would not know this. So I did not count anyone down for this. I just want to make it clear going forward that I want you to start really looking closer at this now that you're getting more experience. For example, notice the first line, one of Adobe's goals for InDesign. InDesign is a proper noun. We don't want to ever hyphenate a name of a product, a company name, a person's name. That's just definitely something you want to avoid at almost any cost. So how do we get around that? There are several things you're going to learn about in the hyphenation settings that will let you go in and change the properties for a particular paragraph. And some of those say, and I'm just going to bring it down from the control panel. This will be a local edit, but you can build this into your paragraph styles once we get into how to do paragraph styles. But until then, it's a paragraph level command. And you can see that I can turn hyphenation on and off completely if I want to. I'm going to turn the preview on and I can see what that looks like. Or I can say, all right, I want at least, let's say, 3 letters in front of the hyphen and three letters after the hyphen and 3 letters in front. I may say, you know what, if a word is capitalized, I really don't want that hyphenated. I can always go back and change these on a case-by-case basis. Would you ever want to hyphenate the last word of a paragraph? Absolutely not. You want to make sure that that gets turned off. In fact, some people are very sensitive about hyphenation happening across multiple columns. For example, a word at the bottom of column 1 has to break in order to fit partially on one or the other. So now half the word is at the bottom of column 1 and half the word is at the top of column 2. It just depends on the quality of your publication. The higher quality of the publication, the more strict people are about hyphenation rules. So I want you to know that you can do that. Now I'm going to turn these back the way they work. So I want to show you another way that you can fix something as a last resort. Let's say that you wanted everything in this hyphenated the way it is, which I hope you don't, but there's one word that you want to select and you want to make sure that InDesign still allows the hyphenation rules to take place, but you want to make a one-word exception. I highlight the word. Again, I can go to the control panel menu, but instead of going to the hyphenation command, I'm going to go to this command called no break. And it will put a special code in this word, invisible code, saying no matter where this falls on a line, this word is not allowed to break. Personally, I would have probably chosen to change the hyphenation command for this because I don't like planet period either. This is too small of a word down here. This I think would have looked much better down below. And in this case, we do have the option of playing around with the width of this text box. Though I want these consistent from slide to slide, it may be better to make some size changes in the particular frame. Okay, I'm going to move down again. Here's another thing that I saw. This is definitely something you do not want to see in your slide. I have a last word that's hyphenated. I have 2 hyphens in a row, which is not typically that bad if it was small type. Often we make a judgment that you can never have more than 2 hyphens in a row, and this doesn't break that. But in that one paragraph, we have 4 hyphens, and that's usually something we want to avoid as well. So in this case, I would definitely want to go up to my hyphenation command, and I would say I don't want to hyphenate the last word. I don't want to hyphenate capitalized words, and I would probably force this to have at least 3 characters before and 3 characters after. Now this has pushed this text box so far down from all of the hyphenations that I have an overflow now. So I may want to make an adjustment to the size of my box, and I had done this, I had forced this so that I could show everybody. I could not get it to happen the way it happened on a student's assignment, but that's the way it should work. And if you have a single word at the end of a paragraph, it's really nice to try to bring down, especially if there's a small word you could put in front of it to bring it down. And we'll talk more about line breaks. And I don't want anybody to be concerned that this was in their homework assignment because all of you had some really great ideas, and I loved the colors, I loved the designs, and these were These are issues that I'm just bringing up as you're getting more involved in InDesign, so you can start looking ahead at what things you want to pay attention to. All right. In the assignment with the packaging, everybody made such great observations. I was so excited to get the feedback on that lab. I believe that was lab 5, but a couple of questions came up, and I want to go over those. So let me go over here. I'm going to let me do it this way. And I just put a text box here to write a couple of things down. All right. Several of you made the observation that the InDesign file itself in a final file was smaller than the high quality print PDF file or the package itself. And I want to just make that really clear. This is the lab that you're going to do. This is this lab 7 that I'm going to be getting to. And you can see that there are several images here. But remember, these images are not actually in the InDesign file. They, as one person put it, it is not embedded as you would see in a Microsoft Word file. Instead, it is bringing in a low resolution thumbnail that looks very clear on the screen, but would not be sufficient enough to print with. When you send this InDesign file to a PDF file, you export it, or you send it to your printer, InDesign goes out, gets the information from the image files on your hard drive, and it embeds it at that point. It either embeds it into the PDF file, or it embeds it into, essentially embeds it into the hard copy that gets printed from your inkjet printer. So that's why your InDesign file will typically be a smaller file size than either the high quality PDF file or the packaged file. Now let's talk a moment about the packaged file. The packaged file includes the InDesign file, all the fonts that are being used, as you all found out, and all of the images that are being referenced at their full size. Even the press quality, and often let's just take a look at our export file here. If I go to my PDF export and I say high quality print, and let me just do a save here. I won't finish it, but let's take a look at the compression on this. So even with high quality print, it is going to throw away any pixels over 300 for images that are over 450. Several of you, I can tell, have really nice cameras, and you are taking these pictures at the maximum ability of that camera to capture pixels. So, and then you're shrinking a lot of these pictures to fit into some of these assignments. Your pixels per inch could be as high as 1,000, 2,000 pixels per inch, because not only are you starting with a really high quality image, you're shrinking that image. So your high quality print PDF is going to be smaller than the folder that contains the images used in that InDesign file. And that's okay. That's exactly the way you want it. That package is huge, and of course if you really wanted that package to come down in size, you would have to go into Photoshop. You would want to downsize the resolution so that it works perfectly in InDesign, but it may not work for a, I don't know, a 3-foot poster. But it'll work for that particular assignment. I don't necessarily think you even have to do that. If the person receiving the package can get that package through some cloud-based system, or which is what most of us are using today to transfer files back and forth. Email is not going to be a large enough pipe to port this stuff through, but through Google Drive, Dropbox, any number of send it to me accounts, that kind of thing, you are allowed to send very large packages. Plus, that package that gets created, that folder, I would typically zip that. I would compress it using whatever compression software my system has. So anyway, I really hope that helps people understand why those size differences, if you didn't catch that before, why they looked the way they did. All right, another question that came up was, when InDesign packages a folder, in the fonts folder, a couple of people asked about this file. And let me just type in, let's say, 11.lst. And let me zoom in on this. So you might have underneath this myriad, regular, whatever that is, OTF or open typeface. And then it may have myriad bold, myriad compressed, whatever the fonts are. But at the top there is this Adobe FNT. It has a number, and that number matches the number of fonts that are in this folder, .lst. This file is a pointer file. And this is very recent in InDesign's history. When someone received a package, people were having to install the font in that fonts folder onto their machines. And people were getting upset for two reasons. One, the font companies were really getting upset saying that's illegal. They are putting those fonts on their system and I can't guarantee that they will remove them when they are done printing this job. And two, some people, graphic artists, independent artists who were dealing with lots of clients, were constantly loading fonts onto their system and then having to take them off or move the usage rules around with their type utility that they use. And people were looking for a solution to simplify this. So what Adobe did is they incorporated this file into the fonts folder during the packaging process. If that font folder stays in the exact same proximity as to the InDesign file as it was in the package. So think back on what that package looked like. At the top level of the package folder was the InDesign file, a folder containing fonts, and a folder containing images. If those two folders stay in the same proximity, meaning they're in a parent folder, doesn't really matter what the name of it is, it's just whatever the package folder name you came up with is, it allows the InDesign file to use the fonts in that font folder without having to install them manually on your system. So that means that those fonts are available to that InDesign file only. It is not available for your Microsoft Word files or for your Excel files or whatever application you use. Even Illustrator and Photoshop will not have access to those fonts in this fonts folder. But your InDesign file will. This one particular InDesign file will. If I create a new InDesign file, it will not have access to these fonts. If I take that InDesign file out of the package folder and place it somewhere else on my hard drive and then open it up, it will not have access to those fonts. You will have to load them on your system. But this is the file that allows that functionality. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. All right, let's see, file sizes, font quality, hyphenation, transparency versus tint. Okay, I think I've gone over all of the main questions. So let's get back to Lab 7. I have two files here which you're going to get this first one. As soon as this webcast is over, I'm going to go ahead and upload this on the server, up on the WordPress, the link. So the link will take you to Dropbox as they normally do, and it will give you the pieces you're going to need for this lab. But the lab itself, this document will be a PDF file that I can load directly onto WordPress. And there's quite a few instructions here. It goes through all the steps you're going to need to take, some background on this, where the files will be, as I just described. And I think you can have some real fun with this lab, and this is what you will be creating. So what I thought might be kind of nice is for me to go through and dissect this a little bit. And these are all of the things that you're going to need to do in order to make this work. This is a list of all of the items that will be involved. You are not going to know how to do many of these things until this week is progressing, because many of these things are the things we're going to be talking about this week. All right, number 1, frame inset. So we have this text box, and let me let this refresh. All right. We can see that the text in here is being pushed away from the edge of that text box. Notice too that that text box is not the same in all 4 corners. And after last week, everyone should know that that probably had something to do with the rounded corners. And you have a couple of different ways you can do that. We know that we can use live corners, which is what I would like you to take advantage of doing, since we talked about that last week. And you also have under the object menu your corner options. Both of them will provide a solution similar to this if this is what you want to do. So what's going to keep that text away from the edge? Again, this is something we went over last week. You're going to use your text frame options command, and I can see that the inset for this object is 11 points. This text is not allowed to come within 11 points of the edge of the frame. So you already know this. So these are some of the things that you can get started on the lab if you are done with Lab 6. And then as the week progresses, you'll learn more about the different pieces. This top one that's going to have the website, everybody can do this. This is just a single text box, nothing fancy about it, no fill, no stroke. It just has this text formatted. I'm going to move this out of the way, and I'm going to move this out of the way too. This Bodie, and I'm not really sure if that's how you pronounce the name of this, it's a ghost town, is rotated text. It is still editable, and I can see if I go up here that it was done in PF Champion Script Pro, bold, a really pretty script font, and it has an outline. So let me just go over to my swatches panel and look, and it has a fill of one color, and it has an outline of another color. And you'll remember that I said that we typically do not outline text except for large decorative. This is something else I'm seeing a lot on homework assignments, and I don't mind you playing around with this. But remember, the smaller the type, the more you are making it harder for your reader to really pick up the sense of that text with their brain, okay? So even though it might be fun sometimes, use it for a design element, not so much as a fill color type thing. I would say that unless it's in a heading or the type is at least, 70 points, I can't even make a judgment that would say don't do it over or under this. I would really not stroke text. But in this case, it's a really nice look. And Cindy Reese, who was the previous instructor, she did the design on this page, and this is really a nice effect here. So it was a typical text box that then was rotated. And as I said, we're going to talk about how we rotate text later in the week, so you'll be able to do this as well. The little stars that went underneath this, I'm just going to undo it. You can see we've got these little stars going across. They're at the exact same rotation as the text, which you'll be able to see if I click on this particular text box. Let me see, and my rotation field up here in my control panel says 26.5, and then I look at this grouped set of icons. These little stars are also at a rotation of 26.5. So it's matching the Bodhi word. These check boxes are nothing more than little stars. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup these. And that's our little star tool over here. Our polygon tool, we double click on it to get what number of sides we want. These are 5-sided stars, and they probably have a 10 or a 20% star inset. We click OK, and you can see that I'm getting a star not quite the same. What's going on here? This star has much deeper legs, so I would probably go back, double click on my polygon tool again and say, well, how about 40%? What's that going to do? And I can see I'm getting much closer to the look and feel of this star here. And let me just bring this over here. We'll zoom in on it. And that is much closer. I'm just going to rotate this out a little bit here. And I'm going to probably resize it. You can get a comparison here. One of the differences is the shoulders of the top two arms. You can see mine are more at a slant. And if you hold down your Shift key as you are creating that star, you should get straighter shoulders, ones that are more similar to this here. And of course, these do not have a stroke. The one that was in the file has no stroke. It just has a fill, where these that I'm drawing on the fly here have a stroke, which is why they look very different. Once you get several stars together, and we're going to talk this week about the step and repeat command, which will allow you to create a series of images, and you can designate how far apart you want them to be and how many you want, and InDesign will do that automatically. So that's another thing that we'll be dealing with. Let me just move this out of the way. All right, as we drill down, you can see that this is going to be much easier if we have separate layers for this project. And if I go to my Layers panel, you can see that Cindy created a top text. She has a photo layer and a background layer. So anything that you see a blue edge to means that it's on the bottom layer. Anything with a red outer frame color, which of course this is all non-printing, that means that it's on the photo layer. Anything that had a green frame edge, and I'm going to close this just for a moment so we can look. You can see all of this type. And if I move down here, both of these items that we talked about earlier, these are all on the type layer. And like I said, we're going to definitely talk about this later in the week. This orientation of these images should look very familiar because it was done using the grid function. So that we just finished doing last week. As I drag this out, I press my up arrow and right arrow to create those frames, and then I use my gap tool, which is not going to work out here on the pasteboard. I have to have it active on the page. But I can show you here, right? This is how we're going to be able to change that size difference between those images. And all of you did a pretty successful job of using that and getting those consistent spacing gaps in between. All right, drilling down one more. Underneath all this text and all of these images are just two additional frames. We have the outer frame, which is a bleed, and that goes beyond the edge of the page, which is the black line. And I know that because if I go into preview mode, I can see that all of that is getting chopped off up to the edge of the page. So that's going to be your very outside color that you want trimming the outer edge of the page. Within that is another frame with rounded corners, and this is just being used for color as well. It doesn't hold any text. It's not holding any images. It's just for color. And both of these two frames are on the bottom layer, on that background layer. So in addition to you understanding the concept of layers, you're also going to need to understand the concept of stacked items. And that's another thing listed over here. I'm just going to move these down just a hair. And we will be doing another webcast on that. this week. So please don't get overwhelmed by this. I don't want anyone to worry because they're saying I don't know how to do these things yet. I'm just introducing this at the beginning of the week so everybody has a chance to just start setting up the pieces, the things you know. You can start thinking about how you want to design this. And I'll be spending more time on this, but this is what we talk about when we mention the word stacking. This is what I mean. I have 3 items. They're all on the same layer, but there is definitely a stacking order. And in InDesign, every object is in a different stacking order. No 2 objects are on the same exact level. And I can't say layer because, in fact, they are on the same layer, but they're in a different stacking order. To change the stacking order, you have to do what you do in a lot of applications. You tell it to go to the back or to go backward. And the easiest way to do that is just to click on the object, then right-click, and you use the arrange command, which I know I've mentioned before, and you say what you want it to do. Do you want to bring this to the front? Do you want to bring it forward? Do you want to send it to back? So let me bring that red one to the front, and you'll see that now it's at the top of the stacking order. And it's not only at the stacking order of these 3 items, it's at the top of the stacking order of every item in its layer. And I'll provide more details on that. But anyway, this will help you avoid a situation where this particular item accidentally gets placed behind that item. And then what do you do? How do you get to that item? If you know where that item is, you can use your Control or your Command key and keep clicking until InDesign rotates down to it. Then you can right-click on it, go to Arrange, and say Bring to Front, and you can help yourself get out of that situation. All right, I'm going to see if I can undo my way through this real quickly. See how close we are to getting back to where we were. Okay, and here is the final look and feel. This is going to be part of a final project that you're going to do. This will be a 1-page advertisement for this location. You might make some minor changes when this gets included into the final project. One last thing I want to mention, because it's a pet peeve of mine, this drives me nuts. And yeah, okay. So people are ignoring inch marks instead of quotation marks more and more as our technology makes us put things into HTML. And then when they come back down through any type of a translation editor, and I don't mean a foreign language translator, but any type of a program that strips out formatting, we often see this in a final version of something. And an ad agency would usually have a conniption fit if they saw this, because this is not a quotation mark. This is an inch mark. And a quotation mark has open and closed quotation marks, and that is Shift, pressing the quotation mark on your machine. So when you are turning something in, often when you're typing, InDesign has a preference to say when you type, do you want to put in curly quotation marks, actually real quotation marks instead of, some people call them straight quotation marks. Other people will call them what they really are, which are inch and foot marks, because a single quote, if it is straight, is a foot mark. It's not really a single quotation mark. The other thing you want to make sure is consistent is where's your punctuation. In the United States, the tradition has been that quotation marks are always on the outside of punctuation. That's not the convention for England, for example. Punctuation marks are on the outside of quotation marks. More and more, we are finding that we can't always follow that rule because we are often putting in quotation marks websites or a special command. Well, we don't want people to think that the period at the end of a sentence is part of that command. So we purposely take that punctuation mark and we put it on the outside of that quotation mark. Though by American tradition and convention, this is wrong. What I would ask is that you just be consistent. So for example, this word had the period on the inside, and yet if we move down further, we had a period that was on the outside. And I'm sure this came from that particular website where people aren't really paying attention to that. But what you're creating is a finished, published piece that people are going to look at, and they're going to judge not only from an information basis, but they are going to judge it according to production rules that we follow and have followed. This is just something that the typewriter changed for us. It really wasn't the case until the typewriter was invented, and though that typewriter has been gone from our lives for many, many years, and in fact decades, we are still following those same conventions that were introduced out of necessity because we had a machine that could only type in monospace type. That's where 2 spaces after a period were introduced. That's where straight quotes were introduced, 2 hyphens instead of an em dash. And I can just go on and on because it drives me nuts. Okay, I will probably revisit this again when we get more into paragraph styles, but keep it on your radar as you move forward. All right, I think that's it for this. Please send any questions you have on this, and make sure that you watch all the webcasts for this week. I think they'll be very helpful in you completing this with a little bit of ease. All right, till next time, signing off.